Elena's hands trembled as she heard the conversation through the slightly open door of Dante Salvatore's office. The most powerful mafia boss in Chicago was speaking to his 7-year-old son about choosing a new mother from 3 wealthy candidates. Her heart stopped when little Marco's voice rang out clearly, "I don't want any of them, Papa. I want Elena to be my mama." The silence that followed was deafening. She knew she should run, disappear before Dante discovered her secret, that she had a 4-year-old daughter hidden in a small apartment across town, but her feet wouldn't move. Through the crack in the door, she saw Dante's steel-grey eyes widen in shock, his powerful frame going completely still. This was the moment that would change everything, the moment when a simple housemaid's world collided with the dangerous empire of the Salvatore family, and nothing would ever be the same again. If you want to discover how this impossible love story began and what happened when Dante learned about Elena's hidden secret, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more emotional stories like this one to life. Elena Rodriguez had been working as a housemaid in the Salvatore mansion for exactly 6 months, and every single day felt like walking through a minefield. The sprawling estate in Chicago's most exclusive neighborhood was a fortress of marble and secrets, where men in expensive suits spoke in hushed Italian, and every shadow could hide danger. She moved silently through the hallways, her worn sneakers making no sound on the polished floors. At 26, Elena had learned to become invisible, a survival skill she'd perfected since arriving from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination. Her English was flawless now, though she still whispered prayers in Spanish when she thought no one was listening. The truth was, Elena desperately needed this job. Every dollar she earned went toward rent for the tiny apartment where her 4-year-old daughter Sophia waited for her each night. Sophia, her beautiful secret, the reason she worked 3 jobs and never complained about the exhaustion that made her bones ache. "Elena!" Marco's excited voice echoed through the mansion's grand foyer. The 7-year-old came running toward her, his dark hair messy from playing, his eyes bright with the kind of joy she rarely saw in this cold house. "Hola, pequeño," she said softly, automatically switching to Spanish. Marco had been learning from her, much to his father's initial disapproval. "How was school today?" "Boring," Marco said, wrapping his small arms around her waist. "But I drew you something." Elena's heart melted as it did every time Marco showed her affection. The boy had been starving for maternal love since his mother's death 3 years ago. Dante Salvatore might be the most feared man in Chicago, but when it came to emotional connection with his son, he was lost. "Let me see," Elena said, kneeling to Marco's level. He pulled out a crayon drawing of 2 figures, a woman with long dark hair and a small boy, both smiling under a bright yellow sun. "That's you and me," Marco explained proudly. "We're happy." Elena's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, Marco, but you should draw pictures of you and your papa too." Marco's expression dimmed slightly. "Papa doesn't smile like you do. He's always working or talking to scary men." Before Elena could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the marble hallway. Dante Salvatore appeared, his presence immediately commanding the space. At 34, he was devastatingly handsome in a way that made Elena's pulse quicken despite every logical reason to fear him. His tailored black suit fit his muscular frame perfectly, and his steel-grey eyes missed nothing. "Marco," Dante's voice was firm but not unkind, "you have homework." "But Papa, Elena just got here, and I wanted to show her—" "Homework first." Dante's gaze shifted to Elena, who immediately stood and smoothed her simple black uniform. "Ms. Rodriguez, I need to speak with you after dinner." Elena's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Had he discovered her secret? "Of course, Mr. Salvatore." As Dante walked away, Marco tugged on Elena's hand. "Don't worry," he whispered. "Papa likes you. I can tell." If only it were that simple, Elena thought. The rest of the day passed in a blur of cleaning, cooking, and trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The Salvatore mansion was always filled with tension, but today felt different. Men in suits came and went, speaking in rapid Italian that Elena pretended not to understand, though she caught enough words to know they were discussing business, the kind of business that made people disappear. At 8 o'clock, after Marco had been tucked into bed with a story Elena told him in both English and Spanish, she knocked on Dante's office door. "Enter." The office was a study in power and intimidation. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and a massive desk that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. But it was the man behind the desk who truly commanded attention. Dante had loosened his tie, and Elena could see the edge of a tattoo peeking above his collar, a reminder of the dangerous world he inhabited. "Sit," he said, not looking up from the papers he was reviewing. Elena perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. The silence stretched until finally Dante raised his eyes to meet hers. "My advisors believe it's time for me to remarry," he said without preamble. "For Marco's sake. A boy needs a mother." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, sir. They've arranged for 3 suitable candidates to visit this weekend, daughters of allied families, women who understand our world." His grey eyes studied her face intently. "Marco will meet them and choose." That's wonderful, Mr. Salvatore. Marco deserves happiness." Something flickered in Dante's expression, surprise perhaps at her genuine response. "You care about him?" It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "Very much. He's a special boy." "Yes, he is." Dante leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. "Tell me, Ms. Rodriguez, what do you think makes a good mother?" The question caught Elena off guard. She thought of Sophia, of the sacrifices she made every day, of the love that drove her to work until her hands bled. "Love," she said simply. "Everything else can be learned, but love, that has to be real." Dante was quiet for a long moment. "You may go." Elena stood, but as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Ms. Rodriguez." "Yes, sir. Thank you for caring about my son." The sincerity in his voice made Elena's chest tight. "It's not difficult, Mr. Salvatore. He makes it easy to love him." As Elena left the office, she didn't see the way Dante's hands clenched into fists on his desk or the storm of emotions that crossed his face. She was too busy trying to calm her racing heart and ignore the voice in her head that whispered dangerous things about the man who held her world in his powerful hands. That weekend would change everything. But for now, Elena simply went home to her daughter, unaware that in 3 days, little Marco Salvatore would make a choice that would turn their lives upside down and force Elena to confront feelings she'd been desperately trying to ignore. The stage was set, the players were in position, and love, as it always did, was about to complicate everything. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Chicago feel alive. Elena had spent the entire week preparing the mansion for the arrival of Dante's potential brides, polishing every surface until it gleamed and arranging flowers in crystal vases that cost more than her monthly rent. She tried not to think about what it meant, that soon another woman would live in these halls, would tuck Marco into bed, would stand beside Dante as his wife. The thought made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine. "Elena, they're coming!" Marco burst into the kitchen where she was preparing refreshments for the afternoon meetings. His face was a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made Elena's heart squeeze. "Are you ready to meet them?" she asked gently, smoothing his dark hair. Marco shrugged, suddenly looking much younger than his 7 years. "I guess. Papa says I have to choose the one I like best. And what if you don't like any of them? Papa says I have to choose anyway, for the family." Marco's voice was small, resigned in a way that no child should be. Elena knelt down to his level, taking his small hands in hers. "Marco, listen to me. Your happiness matters. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't." Before Marco could respond, the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the mansion. Elena's stomach twisted as she heard Dante's voice greeting his guests. "I should go," she whispered to Marco. "Remember what I said, okay?" The first candidate was Isabella Torino, daughter of a powerful family from New York. She was beautiful in an untouchable way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. She spoke to Marco with the kind of forced sweetness that made Elena's skin crawl. "What a handsome little boy," Isabella cooed, not bothering to kneel down to Marco's level. "I'm sure we'll get along wonderfully." Marco nodded politely but stayed close to his father's side. The second candidate was Sophia Benedetti from Boston. She was warmer than Isabella, but treated Marco like an accessory rather than a person, asking him surface-level questions about school and hobbies without really listening to his answers. Elena watched from the doorway as each woman tried to win Marco over with expensive gifts and hollow promises. Her heart broke a little more with each interaction. seeing how desperately Marco wanted to connect, but how impossible these women made it. The third candidate, Maria Castellano from Las Vegas, was the youngest and seemed the most genuine. She actually sat on the floor to play with Marco's toy cars and laughed at his jokes. For a moment, Eleanor thought maybe this could work. But then Maria made a crucial mistake. "You know, Marco," she said, "when I'm your new mama, we'll have to get you a proper nanny. Someone more appropriate for a family like ours." Marco's face fell. "What's wrong with Elena?" "Oh, nothing's wrong with her, sweetie. She's just, well, she's the help. You'll need someone with better breeding to guide you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Helena saw Dante's jaw tighten, but before he could speak, Marco stood up with a dignity that reminded everyone exactly whose son he was. "I want to talk to Papa, alone." The women were escorted to the garden for tea, while Dante and Marco disappeared into the office. Elena tried to focus on her work, but her hands shook as she arranged pastries on silver platters. 20 minutes later, the office door opened. Marco emerged first, his chin raised with determination. Dante followed, his expression unreadable. "Ladies," Dante called to the garden, "please join us in the living room." Elena found herself drawn to the doorway, unable to resist witnessing whatever was about to happen. The three women arranged themselves elegantly on the cream-colored sofas, each wearing confident smiles. "Marco has made his choice," Dante announced, his hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. Isabella leaned forward eagerly. "And?" Marco took a deep breath, his young voice clear and strong. "I don't want any of you to be my mama." The silence was deafening. Sophia's mouth fell open. Maria looked confused. Isabella's face flushed with indignation. "Excuse me?" Isabella snapped. "What do you mean you don't want any of us?" "I mean I already know who I want to be my mama," Marco said, his courage growing. "I want Elena." Elena's world tilted on its axis. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt like she might faint. This couldn't be happening. This was impossible. "The maid?" Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dante, surely you're not going to allow this ridiculous—" "Enough!" Dante's voice cut through the room like a blade. The single word carried such authority that even Isabella fell silent. "My son has made his choice." "But she's nobody," Isabella protested. "She's a servant. You can't possibly—" "I said enough." Dante's grey eyes had turned to ice. "This meeting is over. You'll be escorted out." As the three women were ushered from the mansion in various states of shock and outrage, Elena remained frozen in the doorway. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Marco ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I chose you, Elena. I chose you to be my mama." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked over Marco's head to meet Dante's gaze. The intensity in his steel-grey eyes made her breath catch. There was something there. Surprise, yes, but also something deeper, something that made her pulse race. "Marco," Dante said quietly, "go to your room. Elena and I need to talk." As Marco reluctantly obeyed, Elena found herself alone with the most dangerous man in Chicago, her secret burning in her chest like a live coal. How could she tell him about Sophia now? How could she explain that she was already a mother, that she had been lying to him for 6 months? "Well," Dante said, his voice carefully controlled, "it seems my son has made an interesting choice." Elena's hands trembled. "Mr. Salvatore, I never encouraged this. I know." He stepped closer and Elena caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, masculine, intoxicating. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" Dante's eyes searched her face. "My son has chosen you. In our world, family loyalty is everything. Marco's happiness is everything. But you're the woman my son wants as his mother. That makes you far from just anything." Eleanor felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. "Mr. Salvatore, there are things you don't know about me, things that would change your mind." Something flickered in Dante's expression. "Then tell me." Elena opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could she tell him about Sophia? How could she risk everything when Marco was looking at her with such hope? I need time to think." Dante nodded slowly. "You have until tomorrow night. But Elena," his voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine, "don't even think about running. My son has claimed you as family. That means you're under my protection now, whether you like it or not." As Elena left the mansion that night, her mind reeling with the impossibility of her situation. She didn't see the black SUV that followed her home. She didn't notice the man with the camera who documented her entering the small apartment building. And she certainly didn't know that by morning, Dante Salvatore would know everything about her secret daughter, and their lives would be changed forever. The choice had been made. Now came the consequences. Elena barely slept that night. She sat in her tiny apartment, watching Sophia sleep in the bed they shared, and tried to figure out how to tell the most powerful man in Chicago that she had been lying to him for 6 months. Sophia stirred, her dark curls catching the moonlight streaming through the thin curtains. At 4 years old, she was Elena's entire world, the reason Elena worked herself to exhaustion, the reason she took risks like working for the Salvatore family. "Mommy?" Sophia's sleepy voice made Elena's heart clench. "Si, mi amor. Go back to sleep. Will you tell me about the prince again?" Elena smiled despite her anxiety. Sophia was obsessed with fairy tales, especially ones where the prince saved the princess. If only life were that simple. "Tomorrow, baby. Sleep now." As Sophia drifted back to sleep, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Be ready at 8 a.m. We need to talk." Elena's blood ran cold. How had Dante gotten her number? More importantly, what did he want to talk about? The next morning came too quickly. Elena arranged for her neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, to watch Sophia, something she hated doing because it meant owing favors she couldn't afford to repay. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up outside her building. Elena's hands shook as she walked toward it, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The driver was one of Dante's men. She recognized him from the mansion. He opened the door without a word, and Elena slid into the leather interior, her heart hammering. But instead of being taken to the mansion, the SUV drove to a small cafe in a quiet neighborhood. Elena was confused until she saw Dante sitting at a corner table, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, despite the early hour. "Sit," he said when she approached, his voice giving nothing away. Elena sat across from him, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in her simple jeans and sweater compared to his expensive attire. "Coffee?" Dante asked, signaling the waitress. Yes, thank you." They sat in silence until the coffee arrived. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug, using it as an anchor against the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Tell me about Sophia," Dante said quietly. Elena's mug slipped from her nerveless fingers, coffee splashing across the table. "What?" "Your daughter, Sophia Rodriguez, 4 years old, lives with you in apartment 3B at 1247 Maple Street." Dante's grey eyes never left her face. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "How did you—" "I'm Dante Salvatore. I know everything about everyone who enters my world." His voice was calm, but Elena could see the storm brewing in his eyes. "The question is, why didn't you tell me?" Elena's hands trembled in her lap. "Because I knew you'd fire me, because I knew you'd never trust someone who lied to you, because I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" "Of losing the only job that pays enough to keep my daughter fed and safe." The words burst out of Elena, months of fear and desperation finally finding voice. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be a single mother with no family, no support, no safety net? I took this job because I was desperate, and I kept the secret because I was even more desperate." Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Where is Sophia's father?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Gone. The moment I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. I haven't seen him since. And your family? Dead, or might as well be. My parents died in a car accident when I was 20. I have no siblings, no aunts or uncles who care." Elena wiped away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "It's just me and Sophia against the world." Something shifted in Dante's expression, a softening that Elena hadn't expected. "Show me a picture of her." Elena hesitated, then pulled out her phone. The wallpaper was a photo of Sophia laughing, her dark curls wild around her face, her brown eyes sparkling with joy. Dante studied the image for a long moment. "She looks like you. Everyone says that. Marco would love her." Elena's breath caught. "Mr. Salvatore." "Dante, if you're going to be part of my family, you should use my name." "I can't be part of your family. You don't understand." "What don't I understand?" Dante leaned forward, his intensity making Elena's pulse race. "That you're a mother who would do anything to protect her child, that you work 3 jobs to keep her safe, that you've sacrificed everything for her happiness." Elena stared at him, confused by the admiration in his voice. "Elena," Dante continued, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it, "do you know why my son chose you?" She shook her head. "Because you love him, really love him, not because of who his father is or what he can give you, but because of who he is. That kind of love is rare in my world, it's precious. But Sophia will be welcomed into our family with open arms. Marco has been asking for a sibling for years." Elena felt like she was drowning. "This is insane. You can't just decide to marry me because your son asked you to. You don't even know me." "I know enough." Dante's grey eyes held hers captive. "I know you're brave enough to work for a man you're terrified of to provide for your daughter. I know you're kind enough to love a lonely little boy who isn't even yours. I know you're strong enough to survive on your own in a world that's tried to break you. That's not enough for a marriage, isn't it?" Dante reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sent electricity shooting up Elena's arm. "Most marriages in my world are business arrangements, but this could be something real." Elena pulled her hand away, her heart racing. "You don't love me." "No," Dante admitted, and Elena tried to ignore the stab of disappointment. "But I respect you, I admire you, and I'm attracted to you in ways that terrify me." Elena's breath caught. "Mr. Salvatore..." Dante, this is crazy. You could have anyone. Why would you want someone like me?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "My first wife was chosen for me. Beautiful, well-bred, perfect on paper, but she never loved Marco the way you do. She never looked at me the way you do when you think I'm not watching." Elena's cheeks burned. "I don't. You do." Dante's voice was soft but certain. "And for the first time in my life, I want to try building something real, something based on choice rather than obligation." Elena's mind reeled. This was impossible. This was insane. This was... "I need to think," she whispered. "Of course. But Elena..." Dante stood, pulling out his wallet to pay for the coffee. "Don't take too long. My world is dangerous, and now that I know about Sophia, I need to make sure you're both protected." "Protected from what?" Dante's expression darkened. "From people who would use your daughter to hurt me. From people who would see your connection to Marco as a weakness to exploit." He leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. "You're in my world now, whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you'll let me keep you safe." As Dante walked away, Elena sat frozen in her chair, her world spinning out of control. She thought of Sophia, of Marco, of the impossible choice she was being asked to make. Love or safety, dreams or reality, a fairy tale or a nightmare. The clock was ticking, and Elena had never felt more lost in her life. But as she watched Dante's SUV disappear into traffic, she couldn't shake the memory of his touch, or the way his eyes had softened when he looked at Sophia's picture. Maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could come true, even for a housemaid from Mexico who had nothing to offer but love. Elena spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of caring for Sophia, while her mind churned with impossible possibilities. Every time she looked at her daughter, playing with her worn dolls, singing Spanish lullabies, asking for stories about princesses, Elena's heart broke a little more. How could she explain to a 4-year-old that their entire world might be about to change? That evening, as Elena was putting Sophia to bed in their tiny apartment, her daughter looked up with those impossibly wise brown eyes and asked, "Mummy, are you sad?" Elena smoothed Sophia's dark curls, so similar to her own. "Why do you ask, mi amor? You keep looking at me like you're going to cry." Elena's throat tightened. Her daughter was too perceptive, too aware of the adult worries that Elena tried so hard to shield her from. "I'm just thinking about some big decisions, baby." "What kind of decisions?" Elena hesitated. How much could she tell a 4-year-old? "Well, there's a little boy I take care of at work. His name is Marco, and he's very lonely." Sophia's eyes lit up with interest. "Is he nice?" "Very nice. He's 7 years old, and he loves cars and stories, and he asked if I could be his mama." Sophia considered this seriously. "But you're my mama." "I would always be your mama, no matter what. But Marco doesn't have a mama, and his papa thinks maybe we could all be a family together. Like in the princess stories, where the princess marries the king and they all live in the castle." Elena's heart clenched. "Something like that." Sophia was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Would I get to meet Marco?" "If we decided to do this, yes. You would live in the same house and be like brother and sister. Would I have my own room? Elena thought of the Salvatore mansion with its dozens of rooms. Yes, baby, you would have your own room. Sophia smiled sleepily. I think I would like a brother. And if Marco is lonely, we should help him not be lonely anymore. Elena kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the simple wisdom of children. Go to sleep, mi amor. Sweet dreams. As Sophia drifted off, Elena sat in their tiny living room, staring at her phone. Dante had given her until tomorrow night, but she already knew what her answer had to be. The next morning, Elena called in sick to her other jobs and spent the day playing with Sophia, memorizing every moment of their simple life together, because after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. At 6 o'clock, Elena's neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, knocked on the door. Elena, there's a man downstairs asking for you. Very handsome, very expensive suit. He says his name is Dante. Elena's heart stopped. He was here, early. Mrs. Garcia, could you watch Sophia for just a few minutes? I need to speak with him. Elena found Dante standing beside his black SUV, looking completely out of place in her run-down neighborhood. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, and several of her neighbors were peeking out their windows at the obvious display of wealth and power. You're early, Elena said, her voice barely steady. I couldn't wait. Dante's grey eyes searched her face. Have you made your decision? Elena took a deep breath. I want to see Sophia first. I want you to meet her before I give you my answer. Something flickered in Dante's expression, surprise perhaps that she was setting conditions. All right. Elena led him up the narrow stairs to her apartment, acutely aware of the peeling paint on the walls, the worn carpet, the sounds of other families living their lives behind thin doors. When they reached her door, she turned to face him. Before we go in, I need you to understand something. Sophia is everything to me. Everything. If you hurt her, if you make her feel unwanted or unwelcome, I will disappear with her so fast you'll never find us. I don't care how powerful you are. Dante's eyes flashed with something that might have been admiration. Understood. Elena opened the door to find Sophia sitting on the couch with Mrs. Garcia, coloring in a book. When she saw Elena, she jumped up with a bright smile that faltered when she noticed the tall man behind her mother. Sophia, Elena said gently, this is Dante. He's Marco's papa. Sophia studied Dante with the serious expression she wore when meeting new people. Dante, for his part, seemed frozen, staring at the little girl with an expression Elena couldn't read. Hello, Sophia said politely in English, then switched to Spanish. Mommy says you have a little boy who needs a mama. Dante looked at Elena. What did she say? Elena translated, and Dante's expression softened. He knelt down to Sophia's level, making himself less intimidating. Yes, he said carefully. Marco is very lonely. He would like very much to have a sister. Sophia tilted her head. Would he play with me? I think he would love to play with you. Sophia considered this, then walked over to her toy box and pulled out a small stuffed elephant, her most prized possession. She held it out to Dante. This is for Marco, so he won't be lonely tonight. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she watched Dante accept the worn stuffed animal with the reverence of someone receiving a priceless gift. Thank you, Sophia. This is very kind. Sophia beamed, then looked at Elena. I like him, Mummy. He has nice eyes. After Mrs. Garcia left and Sophia was settled with her coloring books, Elena and Dante stepped onto the small balcony that overlooked the street. She's remarkable, Dante said quietly, still holding the stuffed elephant. She's everything good in this world, Elena replied, and I won't let anyone hurt her. Neither will I. Dante turned to face her, his expression intense. Elena, I want you to know that if you say yes, Sophia will be treated as my own daughter. She'll have everything, education, protection, love. She'll never want for anything. And what about me? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. What would you expect from me? Dante was quiet for a long moment. Honesty, loyalty, help raising our children, and maybe, someday, if we're lucky, love. Elena's breath caught. Our children, Marco and Sophia, they would be ours together. Elena looked through the sliding door at Sophia, who was humming softly as she colored. Then she thought of Marco, alone in his big mansion, waiting for someone to love him unconditionally. If I say yes, Elena said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. Sophia keeps her last name until she's old enough to choose for herself. I want her to remember where she came from. Agreed. I want to keep working at least part-time. I need to feel useful, not just decorative. Agreed. And I want time. Real time to get to know you, to build something real, not just a business arrangement. Dante stepped closer, his grey eyes intense. Elena, I want you to know something. This isn't just about Marco anymore. These past 2 days, thinking about you, imagining you in my life, I want this, I want you. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Dante, say yes, he whispered, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek. Say yes, and let me show you what it feels like to be cherished. Let me give you and Sophia the life you deserve. Elena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every logical reason not to. When she opened them again, Dante was looking at her with an expression so tender, it took her breath away. Yes, she whispered. Dante's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Yes? Yes, but Dante. Elena placed her hand over his. Don't make me regret this. Never, he promised, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and full of promise. When they broke apart, Elena was breathless. Through the sliding door, she could see Sophia watching them with wide eyes and a delighted smile. Mummy, Sophia called out. Are you marrying the prince? Elena laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, baby, I'm marrying the prince. As Dante pulled her into his arms, Elena realized that sometimes fairy tales did come true. Sometimes the housemaid really did get the prince, and sometimes love really was enough to bridge any gap. Tomorrow their new life would begin. Tonight, Eleanor held on to the last moments of her old world and marveled at the impossible turn her life had taken. Love had found her in the most unlikely place, and she was finally ready to let it change everything. 2 years later, Elena stood in the garden of the Salvatore mansion, watching Sophia and Marco chase butterflies among the roses. At 6, Sophia was fluent in 3 languages and had Dante wrapped around her little finger. At 9, Marco had blossomed into a confident, happy boy who protected his little sister with fierce devotion. Mommy! Papa! Look! Sophia called out, holding up a caterpillar she'd found. Eleanor smiled at the easy way Sophia called Dante Papa now. He had legally adopted her 6 months after their wedding, and she had chosen to take his name, Sophia Salvatore, princess of the Chicago underworld. Very nice, princessa, Dante called back, his arm sliding around Elena's waist. But be gentle with it. Elena leaned into her husband's embrace, still amazed by how natural this felt. Their marriage had started as an arrangement, but it had grown into something beautiful and real. Dante was patient, protective, and passionate, everything she had never dared to dream of. Any regrets? Dante murmured against her ear. Elena looked at their children, because that's what they were now, theirs, and thought of the tiny apartment she'd left behind, the fear that used to keep her awake at night, the loneliness that had been her constant companion. Only one, she said, turning in his arms. Dante's expression grew concerned. What? Elena smiled, reaching up to touch his face. That it took Marco's choice to bring us together. I wish I'd been brave enough to fall in love with you on my own. Dante's answering smile was radiant. We found each other, mi amor. That's all that matters. As he kissed her under the afternoon sun, with their children's laughter filling the air around them, Elena knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with the most impossible choices, and sometimes, just sometimes, choosing love over fear was the only choice that mattered. This story has reached its beautiful ending. If it touched your heart in any way, please leave a like and share it with someone who also loves emotional stories. New stories of love, hope, and transformation are coming soon. Until next time.